and welcome back to the W Basketball Show. I am your host Lukas, recording another solo episode. As you can tell from the title of this episode, going to be doing a WNBL Finals Preview. Going to talk about the awards a little bit, just touch on them because I feel like for the most part, they were pretty well selected. So it'll be more just me celebrating and not much of a value add. And we'll talk a little bit about the last round and, the craziness. And I read or heard somewhere that there were 32 possible outcomes for the ladder going into the last round. It would be great if I could source where I heard that. But you're going to have to just take my word for it. And it was crazy. It was crazy. And I think that's probably the best place to start it. We had the Perth Lynx sitting in 6th place, while the Flames of Sydney and the Spirit of Bendigo were both above them. The Flames were in 4th going into round 15. And then, the Spirit were in 5th. The Flames and the Spirit were on 11-9 records, whereas the Lynx were 10-10. But the Lynx had the tiebreaker over both the Flames and the Spirit. So going into the round, the Lynx needed to beat Bendigo, which they did, and they needed Townsville to beat Sydney, which they did. And it was just all over the place. I think at the start of the week, the Southside Flyers, after the Southside game against the Townsville Fire at the start of the round, which the Flyers won over Townsville, the Flyers are in first, and then after their loss, they dropped down to second. Fire have now moved back into first. Which sets them up to play against the Perth Lynx, and the Southside Flyers, who finished second, will come up against the Melbourne Boomers, who finished third with a record of 12-9. The league really got a lot tighter at the end there. I feel like at the very start there was quite a lot of variance between the top two teams, which were the Townsville Fire and the Perth Lynx for a very long time. And the rest of the pack. With Southside, we're kind of always floating between second and third, and we'll touch on that a bit more later. But I feel like, Townsville started super hot, going off their heater from last season. Perth started off really hot. Then Perth went on that massive losing streak. I think it was 7 games in a row at one point. They were at 8-3, and they have now finished the season 11-10. Or they were 1-7 in that stretch between 8-3 and 11-10 before winning their last 2 games of the season. But now they find themselves in the finals. Look, I was trying to keep it a secret, but I was definitely rooting for the Sydney Flames. Talking about it in the last episode, I thought that the Flames had the second best chance to win it all behind the Southside Flyers, and now they didn't even make the finals. And that's a boon on my part, I suppose. But I also think it's a credit to the Perth Lynx and the Bendigo Spirit the Perth Lynx for fighting back at the very end of the season. But Bendigo really, 6 weeks ago, no one would have expected them to be in the finals hunt. So, a credit to them as well. Well coached, great team play, and Ali Wilson just kind of found another level at the end of the season there. And I feel like if they can retain some form of their core, definitely if they bring back Wilson, Ali, and the same identity and the same bones, then they should be a season better, and they should be looking at improving on this season, which was tied for a record that would have made them the finals. So that's great. I feel like if it's a really good showing for the league, because the other 5 teams that either have the same record as them or better are going to be, unless something huge happens to any of them, they will surely be at a similar level next year, if not a little bit better with some continuity and things like that. So yes, crazy round 15 has left us with Townsville in first, Southside in second, Melbourne in third, and Perth in fourth. I said it before, but we'll start with the 1-4 matchup. No, actually, you know what? I'm immediately going to go back on that. We'll start with the 2-3 matchup, the Southside Flyers versus the Melbourne Boomers. All 3 of these games are scheduled to be played at the Boombox, which maybe easier to get to for WNBL fans, and perhaps a bigger capacity than the State Basketball Center out where Southside play their home games usually. But yeah, there is a feeling that they have earned this second spot, which is albeit only one game better than the Melbourne Boomers, but to then not have their home court advantage in the first round. You'd probably feel some sort of way against that, and all three games being played at the Boombox, which not like it's not like there's two at the Boombox and then one at a neutral location. All three are technically in Melbourne's home stadium. I don't feel like that'll make too much of a difference on the result of this series. I'm definitely going to pick the Southside Flyers. I don't know if I said I'm going to talk about the awards in this episode, but I am going to talk about them. But I think I can actually talk about the MVP right now. Jordan Canada won the MVP, and I think she put up great numbers. She was a really solid performer on a Melbourne team that was outside of her, quite up and down. Naz Hillman, you can imagine her having a couple 30-point games, but then she had a couple 4-point games in the fold. And even though she is someone that can really dominate on the inside, there were games that she really slid. Penina Davidson going down was huge for the Boomers. She was a very consistent force, but I feel like outside of Davidson and Jordan Canada, the rest of the team was quite inconsistent. Maybe you could say she definitely brought the energy every game, and she if the team ever needed some poise, getting Canada and Froling in some action together would usually get them a good look. But just in terms of output, I feel like everyone outside of Jordan Canada on the Melbourne Boomers didn't have the best season. However, on the flip side, for the Southside Flyers, I feel like Mercedes Russell, she didn't even get picked as one of the finalists for the MVP, and her assist numbers are obviously not going to be anywhere near what Jordan Canada's were, but her points were. Defensively, she was such an important piece. She was such an anchor, and she really just controlled the middle every single game on both ends of the court. She did her job. She took care of business. And she produced. And the fact that she didn't even make top 5 for the MVP it's pretty crazy. And yeah, I said this before, but Southside kind of were always in that 2-3 spot all season long. Well, started in like more of the 3 spot, and then floated to, and then found their way into the 2nd spot. And they were probably the league's most consistent team from start to finish. And I feel like Maddie Rocci did a really good job of implementing the game plan. And I feel like Mercedes Russell was right there with her to drive this team along throughout the season. At the start of the season, LJ wasn't playing too well. At the start of the season, I feel like Leilani Mitchell was still trying to find her shot. Beck Cole has been a pretty consistent performer all season long. But, and Nadia Poch made her way outside of she started the season in the starting 5 until Leilani Mitchell took her place in that starting 5, which was a pretty crazy role change, because you go from this like wing who looks great playing the 4 to this tiny guard, and Leilani Mitchell did a great job once she made her way into the starting lineup. But yes, the main drivers of their season were, I think, even Mercedes Russell more so than Maddie Rocci. But I feel like, yeah, just having that consistent play, she wasn't, making any headlines. She just did her job and gave her team a great chance to win every single game. And it ended up getting them in the 2nd seed. So to not even get in top 5, to not even be top 5 in MVP is pretty crazy. And I think that consistency and that connectedness that Southside play with is going to be crucial, and going to be what I think that's going to kind of come through in the finals in their first round series against Melbourne. And I think that's going to be characteristic of what I'm predicting to be their first round win against the Melbourne Boomers. On Melbourne's side, I feel like, they got Wally back late in the season. I feel like they didn't really ever get going. I feel like, not for a whole game at least, like there were small patches of good basketball, maybe a quarter, maybe 2 quarters. We also call that a half where I come from. But never, I can't remember a single game where it was just wire to wire. They just did the job. And so yes, I'm picking Southside to come out of the first round against the Melbourne Boomers. In the other matchup, the 1-4 matchup, which will be played Townsville, Perth, Townsville, which is just so much travel for both teams. Now, look, I might look back on this and regret it. You got the 14-7 Townsville Fire at home. Sorry, with home court advantage. You got the 11-10 Perth Lynx on the road. I actually am going to pick the Perth Lynx to win this series. I feel like when both of these teams were 8-3, Perth had Aari McDonald, Townsville had Alice Kinneck, and I feel like they both had they both slumped for sure since then. But I feel like Perth are refinding their groove around Aari McDonald. In that slump, it did make way for Amy Atwell to just go on like an absolute tear. Make or miss, she might have the most deadly three-pointer in the league. Like, just if she's able to get it up in rhythm, it's a problem for the other team. Because then, as soon as she can get into her comfort zone, only bad things will come for her opposition. Townsville, I feel like at 8-3, both of these teams had a really solid starter. And I'm kind of looking at that more than, the season overall. I just feel like Perth are going to be able to get to their game. They like to play up and down, and having Aari McDonald just makes that so much easier for all of them. She can really just dictate the flow, lead the break, but then also speed the game up in the half court. Defensively, she's one of the more annoying players to come up against. And overall, I feel like the team plays really well together defensively, as well as having really good defenders on the team. But yeah, they've had a vibe. They've had a vibe about them since the start of the season. Even through the losses, there's a real connection there, and so I'm going with the Perth Lynx. I might look back on that and regret it. The safe pick is clearly the Townsville Fire. And there is still that part of Townsville where they might be able to just recapture their post-season form from last year. Even though this team is quite different, they still do have, the foundation of what was the 2023 WNBL champions. So I don't want to overlook that. I don't want to go ahead without saying that they might refine that form. But I am making the pick that I am taking Perth over Townsville for this matchup, which would then set us up for a Southside Perth WNBL Finals. I feel like that would be pretty entertaining. Pretty contrasting styles, or contrasting styles-ish. And I would assume if Southside are playing against Melbourne at Parkville as their quote unquote home ground, then they would probably play against Perth as their for their home games. In the WNBL Finals, just a personal note, whether Southside or Melbourne win, I'll get to see a WNBL final, like grand final match. So that's great news for me. So yeah, I feel like that's the finals preview. The finals preview done. We can move on to the awards, where I've already talked about the MVP being Jordan Canada. I still think Canada's a deserving winner. And she's quite deadly. I think beyond the numbers, she really dictates a lot of stuff. She in her 3-game absence, you could just tell that Melbourne were kind of lost, and as a team that finished third, she was really a driving force. I'm gonna go in order of the way they've done the awards on the website, on their blog. The fan MVP is Jade Melbourne. That might be the most. There might not be a more or we might not get closer to a unanimous decision than the fan MVP, in the basketballing world, than the fan MVP being Jade Melbourne. Great player, puts up good numbers, has highlights, fans love her, so engaging. Got the opportunity to talk to her on this podcast, and yeah, she showed like her superstar personality as well. Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. She was so easy to talk to, so much fun to talk to, and yeah, she backs it up. And she at 21, she's got the future is all hers. She played pretty well at the OQT. She will return to Seattle this upcoming season. You can only assume she'd get, X amount better, and probably see somewhat of an increased role, get more minutes, play against more physical competition, faster competition, because the technical side is there. She'll just scale up this player to become a really quality basketball player and a stalwart of the Australian Opals. So it's just great. It's a really nice time to be an Australian basketball fan, and Jade Melbourne is another reason why.
The NBA moves so quickly these days, it's hard to keep up. Shams and Woj are breaking stories left and right, but the Quick Time Out is right there with them to keep you informed on the latest NBA news. Stop in and let us break it down as it happens. Find the Quick Time Out on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.
The Defensive Player of the Year, Lauren Nicholson of the Sydney Flames. She is such a competitor. She was a really consistent, probably the Flames' most consistent player all season, as Tess Madgen worked her way into form. And, Kayla went from the WNBA season straight into the WNBL season without any sort of transition. Didi Richards found her form later in the season. Paige Bradley, I feel like her role was just ever changing throughout the season, and then she found her form at the end of the season as well. But Lauren Nicholson was just from the start of the season to the end, she was so consistent. Such a great competitor. She really lifted the level of the team. This is talking about the Defensive Player of the Year award, but she is like a lights out shooter and a great offensive player as well. But yeah, another handful. Obviously, the Defensive Player of the Year is going to be an incredible defender, but just like the way she fought over screens. I always love when the Defensive Player of the Year of the basketball league is not a big. And yeah, such a competitor, just brought the game to her opponents every single game. It's a shame that we won't see the Sydney Flames in the WNBL Finals, because they were really humming at the end of the season there, and Lauren Nicholson had put in a shift all season. So yeah, I feel like we're kind of missing out, even though the four teams are going to be so entertaining. The four teams that made the finals are going to be entertaining and great. It would have been nice to see Nicholson and the Flames in the finals. Next, we have Sixth Woman of the Year. Actually, I'm not going to go in order. I'm changing all this stuff on the fly. Breakout Player of the Year, Alex Sharp. I feel like, again, this one could have also gone to Amy Atwell, but I feel like Alex Sharp really, really made her mark on the league. Another really consistent performer. Crazy energetic on the glass. Didn't care who she was coming up against. She really, she made other players adjust to her going after the ball. And yeah, hopefully the UC Caps can retain her for next season, because I feel like she's a pretty good running mate with Jade Melbourne. They might need some more experience on the wing. But yeah, I feel like Alex Sharp's a really, really solid four there in the nation's capital. Now, the last two awards, the Sixth Woman of the Year award, Leilani Mitchell of the Southside Flyers, and the Coach of the Year award, Shannon Seaborn of the Townsville Fire. I find it interesting. So Shannon Seaborn won Coach of the Year last year. Actually, I'm not going to lump these two together. Again, another on-the-fly adjustment. But Shannon Seaborn won Coach of the Year last year and was so deserving. And it seems interesting that he would win it again. Maybe it's unfair to judge him against the bar that he had set last year, but it's also kind of hard not to. It's kind of hard to see, this, even if it is like half a step back or just a step back, it's hard to see him as the Coach of the Year coming against the field. I personally would have probably picked Guy Malloy of the Sydney Flames, just for being able to kind of keep treading, keep their heads above water, and then turn their product into really pretty basketball, really connected basketball, defending for each other, moving the ball really quickly offensively, having a very egalitarian approach to scoring, and just empowering his players within the season. It wasn't like a huge step from one year to the next, and a change that was made in training camp. It was an adjustment made in the chaos of the WNBL season. So I would have personally gone with Guy Malloy, and Leilani Mitchell of the Southside Flyers. Great end to the season. The 6th Woman of the Year award. I don't know. Her numbers, they match up well against the other finalists, but I really feel like she did her work after she had made her way into the starting lineup. So, looking at it from the outside, I feel like maybe I'm splitting hairs here. Maybe I'm being a bit too difficult, but also I don't know if it feels like while she was coming off the bench, yes, she was a great a great part of the team, but I feel like the very best of Leilani Mitchell was when she was starting for them, and I think she'll be crucial in their finals run, and it'll be interesting to see her come up against Melbourne in the first round and see how Melbourne kind of react to that. You probably want to start Wally at the 2. But you never know, man. They might start Wally at the 3 and go with the backcourt of Canada and Conti to match Mitchell and Rochi. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep your eye on. But yeah, I just think that's more of like a technicality thing. Like, in the games where she did come off the bench, was she the best bench player in the league? Whereas I would have probably gone with Alicia Froling of the Bendigo Spirit, because she was like one of the more consistent scorers for their team, and this is just going off the finalists, who were Emma Clark, Abby Wairung, and Tedda Reid. Alicia Froling really just poured in numbers, and it's such an easy mold to be like, who was the best scorer off the bench? But Alicia Froling really did a good job of injecting points into the starting unit, or running stuff with the second unit and just being a consistent bucket, and being really solid on the glass as well. So, this one's a bit more of a bit of a shorter one, but bit of a finals preview, bit of a season wrap, maybe a bit more of an easy listen than some other podcasts on the Deep 2 podcast network. But yeah, the 2023-24, I guess it's just the 2024 finals at this point, should be very entertaining. And if I don't check in with you all next week, which it's more likely that we'll do a JVG unless something crazy happens in the W and we just have to get to it, or in the world of basketball more widely. Then I'll talk to you when the finals are done. So, take it easy, enjoy the finals. We've come the whole season to this point, since November. What's that? Is that 4 long months? Yeah, 4. Well, not really long, but 4 enjoyable months of the WNBL, and this is what it's led to. I'll talk to you in the next episode.
This episode of the Deep 2 is presented by Gelateria Bico, the official gelato of the Deep 2. Gelateria Bico, handmade gelato in the heart of Brunswick.